The significance of this area is that this is the area that General George S. Patton picked out to become the Desert Training Center in preparation for the invasion of North Africa. While he was here, he was able to organize over 1,800,000 men and train them, all getting ready for the desert climate and the heat and no water for the invasion of North Africa. General Patton did every part of Army training here. Not only did he have his men march for 21 miles on the third day they got here, but he also had tank training, all kinds of battles out there in the desert, but also artillery. Also he had Rice Air Base, which is right nearby. He had every aspect of war that he was going to use in North Africa right here at the Desert Training Center. This particular map is the topographical map of the Southern California desert, and it shows the Salton Sea and the area where General Patton trained his troops, the Desert Training Center at Chirrayco Summit. To the upper part where the pink is, somewhere in that area, is Pasadena, California, and San Marino, where General Patton was born. And it was because of that that General Patton picked the Southern California desert out here. He picked 18,000 square miles of desert for all his training facilities, for his artillery, his tanks, his air power, and of course his military soldiers. And once he picked it and organized it and saw everything that he needed was here from a standpoint of air and rail and of course by road, this was a spot. And it was a hit because it prepared the men to the weather, to the heat and lack of water, and just everything in general that was annoying to the North African desert was the same here in the Coachella Valley and this area. Not only it was so close to the North Africa, but the 120 to 130 degree temperature, the desolation of hardly anything living around here other than lizards and snakes, made it a perfect place for General Patton to train his men and getting them acclimated to North Africa. The invasion occurred in 1942 when all the men had been trained. The first group of men, and again that was close to 200,000 or 300,000, were made ready to invade North Africa. That's where Rommel, the famous general of the German army, was in control of all the oil fields in North Africa, which were feeding the German army and a navy and air force. When they invaded North Africa, actually they didn't have much resistance until they got inland a little bit and they got close to the oil fields, and that's where the battles really took place. And Rommel and his Tiger tanks and Panzer tanks really took a toll on some of the military of the United States Army. It took about 4 to 5 months before they were able to take over all the cities that were in the sea area, and eventually push him out, push Rommel out to a point that Rommel 86'd it in some boats and got out of there to get over to Sicily because the Americans had landed and they were taking over. General George Patton was born in San Marino, California, Pasadena, California, and he grew up on a beautiful little ranch. They had horses, they had citrus, and you might say with a silver spoon in his mouth. But he worked hard for everything that he did. General Patton began his military service right out of high school, actually at private school, and he went in, of course, to the military academy. He did not so great in the grades, but he was a great athlete, and in result, he wound up in World War I and was introduced to the tanks when the British introduced the tanks in World War I, along with General Eisenhower. He wasn't the general then, but they had a couple of close calls, and he fell in love with a new military weapon called the tank. Currently, we are in the tank yard of the General Patton Memorial Museum. We have 16 tanks that are in this area with an additional 8 that are on display. This particular tank that we have here is the Sherman medium tank that was used from 1944 all the way to the Korean War. It was used by the United States Army and the Marine Corps. It has a 75 millimeter cannon, 230 caliber machine guns, and one 50 caliber machine gun on the top. It was built as many as possible because we didn't have the big tanks like the Germans did in World War II, and so we built a lot of the Sherman tanks and literally just pestered the German tank corps with as many tanks as we could. This tank saw combat. As you can see, some of the shells that ricocheted off of it. Again, it didn't have heavy armor, but it was very efficient in that we were able to get a lot of tanks against the Germans. It's a big sucker. This is a 1952 medium Patton tank. It's a 90 millimeter cannon, a 130 caliber machine gun through the side, and two Browning 50 calibers, one on the side and one also on the top. And we're very proud of it because it is named after General George S. Patton. And again, it wasn't used until the Korean War that we were able to, you know, give some significance to the glory of General George S. Patton. Well, I think Patton's biggest fans would always say that old Blood and Guts was exactly that. He was a leader of men. When war came about in Europe, he wasn't the last man in the line. He was the first man in his Jeep or his control vehicle, command vehicle out in the front, leading the men on. He was very much like a football coach, and he knew exactly how to get his men inspired, even when they felt hungry and tired, and they saw him out there in front. They knew they had to keep on going. I think probably his worst enemies would say that Patton was a self-centered, egotistical son of a because he always got the limelight. In the newspaper, it was always Patton, 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 and a lot of other generals and officers didn't like that. And in result, it did create some hard feelings with other generals, but Patton didn't care. He knew he had something to do, and that was to win the war. And after the war was over, he came and did the ticker tape parade in New York City. It was wonderful, and they all loved him. Everybody loved General Patton because of the way he was. And he went back to Europe and to kind of get things ready for the occupation of the Berlin area. But that's when the accident occurred, where he was in his command car and a truck pulled in front of him, and he hit his head right on the back side of the front seat and literally pretty much broke his neck. I think General Patton's impact to the country has been, more than anything, the leadership. What he gave us during a time of war when Japan had attacked us and the Germans were just cleaning house on France and trying to go over to Great Britain. He gave us the intestinal fortitude, blood and guts, you call it, to prepare ourselves and go and fight a war and win the war. I think all of us, no matter where you go or who you talk to, even pacifists say General Patton was a leader of men.